and welcome back to Storytime with Alex, reading stories from Allbyon to Britannia, Book 1, The Witches of Old Albion by Brandy Pearson. Today we have another little short story, all complete and beautiful in itself. It's called The Witch, Her Cat and the Lost Child. Once upon a time in Old Albion, in the village of Witham, there lived a witch called Hannah More. She lived in a cottage on the edge of the village near to the foot of the White Hill, where witches had lived for many generations, even when most witches were wanderers. She had a large tabby cat called Maximilian, because he had an M in the stripes above his great green eyes. It was part of the calling of the witch who lived there to organise the Halloween hospitality every year, making sure the strong beer was brewed and the bread was baked, overseeing the laying of the bonfire, and calling the villagers to come and sing and dance as dusk fell. None of this was difficult, as Halloween was celebrated in Old Albion as part of a 3-day season of remembrance. The first day was Halloween, when as evening drew on, dark memories were brought to light and laid to rest. It was a night to laugh at the darkness and seek forgiveness for past faults. All Saints' Day was the day to celebrate all the holy people who had come before, and All Souls' Day to remember ancestors, family and friends who had died. It was the last festivity before the thoughtfulness of Advent and the joy of Christmas. People would come from villages all around for the Halloween hospitality, even Tiberius Knowles, the local wizard from the tower made from old stones. The people of Witham were proud to welcome them all with baskets full of bread and barrels full of strong beer. As dusk fell, everyone would gather in front of the White Hill. They would gaze at the hillside covered in green grass. Then, as the sun sank behind the hill in the gathering gloom, a gateway of stone would appear. 2 upright stones topped by a lintel, upon which had been carved long ago a plaited loaf of bread and a beaker of beer. Those who witnessed it would always let out a sigh of wonder when the gateway appeared. Within the gateway was an ancient doorway which would open, revealing a deep darkness beyond. Then the people, especially those from other villages, would retreat to the far side of the bonfire and rejoice in the light as it was lit. Bread and beer would be laid in the darkness beyond the firelight, and the others would come and would consume them. The people ate, drank and danced, and felt the presence of the others eating and drinking and dancing. As people danced, the music from the band would be accompanied by drums and music in the darkness beyond. As the evening progressed, Hannah More tried to make sure that there was always someone from the village by the gateway, just in case anyone was foolish enough to go through the door. However, on the evening of this particular Halloween, the only person Hannah could find to stand guard was a young man called Tom, who was easily bored. Without telling Hannah, he had passed on the task to his friend Joe so that he could join the party. Joe had already drunk a fair number of beakers of beer and fell asleep, and so missed a small boy called George. George came from a large family, and everyone thought he was with someone else. He had heard the sound of music as the others came from the other world for bread, beer and dancing. Too young to know the story and its warnings, he had toddled through the doorway and into the darkness beyond. It was late in the evening when George's family all came together to make ready to go home and realised that he was missing. No one had seen him since the gateway appeared. They had asked all their friends, and they had not seen him either. Then his parents ran to find Hannah and Tiberius the wizard. They ran to the gateway to check and saw the small footprints disappearing through the gateway and into the darkness. "Wizard!" Hannah cried. "You have a pocket watch. How long is it until midnight?" "A quarter of an hour. If the door closes, we have lost the child for good." "Call out for him, and I will return as quickly as I can." Hannah called over her shoulder as she ran off to her cottage. She returned in a few minutes, carrying Maximilian, her cat. Hannah had scooped him up from his place by the fire where he had been sleeping, and he looked only half awake. "We have called and called," said the distraught parents, "but there is no answer." "Why have you brought your cat?" the wizard asked in surprise. "We will probably not find the child before midnight. He's been gone too long and must have gone too far. Max will keep the doorway open for us." She whispered in the cat's ear and set him down in the doorway, where he sat and started to wash himself. The wizard looked at his pocket watch. "Midnight approaches," he said. The crowd of people who had gathered when they heard about the lost child parted as a wave of darkness approached them and passed through, rustling like the trees with the sound of distant music as the others returned to the other world. As the others in the darkness disappeared through the gateway, the door started to close. But Maximilian, the witch's cat, took no notice of anything and carried on washing his ear with his paw. "Cats hate closed doors," said Hannah the witch. "They always want to be certain that they can get to the other side. Max will keep the door open while we go and find the child." The child's father ran forward with a torch, but as soon as he crossed the threshold, the torch was extinguished. "They will not tolerate torches," said Wizard Tiberius. "Let's see what I can do." He made a gesture with his hand and muttered a spell and formed a ball of light between his hands. He waved it forward through the door and saw it light up smooth walls of stone. "Come on," he said to the child's father. "2 of us should be enough. We do not need to annoy the others any more than we must. We do not want them to think we are invading the other world." Together they quietly stepped over Maximilian the cat and on into the darkness, lit by several bobbing balls of light created by the wizard. Others came forward to follow them, but Hannah told them to stay put. She put her arm around the shoulder of George's mother. "We have to wait," she said, and wait they did. Hannah and George's mother gazed through the door, but the wizard's balls of light had disappeared into the distance. They seemed to wait for hours, for the only person with a timepiece was the wizard. And then, was that a trick of the eye staring into the darkness? The wizard's balls of light reappeared far away, closer and closer, and then a voice. "We've got him! George is here!" Then the wizard, George's father, and the little boy appeared in the doorway. His mother hugged them all and everyone cheered. As the 3 of them stepped over the threshold, Maximilian the cat finished washing his ears and came over to Hannah and wrapped himself around her legs. The door closed with a bang and never opened again. When everyone had recovered, they all excited to know what the wizard, George, and his father had seen inside the hill, but they were disappointed. The wizard and George's father had hurried down the long, dark tunnel. It was hard for them to know how long they had travelled. Eventually, the tunnel opened out into a great cavern. The wizard had needed to make great balls of light and send them out into the darkness. Then they saw ahead of them a great doorway and what seemed like a small bundle of rags at its foot. It was his father who first realised that it was George. They ran across the cavern to discover that George was fast asleep. When George was asked what he had seen, it was also disappointing. He had followed the music down the tunnel, but he had grown confused when he reached the cavern. He saw light from the great doorway. By the time he reached it, the door was closed. It was pitch black, and so the little boy had sat down by the doorway and fallen asleep. The end. Okay, and so there's only one story left now, which I will get to, probably do it in a couple of parts at least. But join me next time. Thank you.